I'll never forget the moment I told my husband I was pregnant. The silence that followed, the way his face went pale, then twisted into something I'd never seen before. And then the words that shattered everything. You ruined everything. I didn't want this child. Within 30 minutes, he was gone. But that's just where this nightmare began. Let me start from the beginning. I'd been married to Chad for 4 years, together for 7. We'd always talked about having kids someday, but it was always vague. Always someday. We never actually put a timeline on it. I was on birth control, being responsible like I thought we both wanted. Then, about 3 months ago, I caught that awful stomach bug going around the office. It knocked me flat for days. The doctor put me on antibiotics, and I recovered quickly. What I didn't realize then was that antibiotics and birth control don't always play nice together. They can interfere with each other, and apparently, that's exactly what happened. When I first missed my period, I didn't panic. My cycle's always been a bit irregular, especially when I'm stressed, and work had been crazy demanding. But then other symptoms started: morning nausea, tender breasts, a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. On my lunch break, I ducked into a drugstore and bought a pregnancy test. My hands were shaking as I took it in the bathroom at work. 2 pink lines appeared, clear as day. Positive. I couldn't believe it. Over the next 2 days, I took 3 more tests. Different brands, different times of day. All positive. For tests, for confirmations, I was pregnant. The emotions hit me in waves. Shock first, then fear. But gradually something else crept in. Excitement, a growing warmth spreading through my chest. I know it wasn't planned, but once the surprise wore off, I started picturing our future as a family. I've always wanted to be a mom, and even though the timing wasn't perfect, I thought Chad would come around once he got over the initial shock. I waited a week to tell him. Wanting to plan the perfect moment, nothing elaborate like those Instagram announcements with confetti and letter boards. That's not us. Instead, I made his favorite dinner, lasagna with garlic bread. I bought his favorite bourbon for him and sparkling cider for me. I even wore the blue dress he always compliments me on. The whole time I was cooking, I rehearsed how I'd tell him. Should I just say it outright? Make a joke? I settled on something simple. Chad, I have some news that's going to change our lives. Chad came home around 7, later than usual. He seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. Not unusual lately since he'd been working on a big project with his team. He barely noticed the nice dinner, just mumbled that it looked good and poured himself a generous glass of bourbon. During dinner, he was quiet, responding with one-word answers to my attempts at conversation. Something felt off, but I chalked it up to work stress. After we finished eating, I took a deep breath and reached for his hand across the table. Chad, I'm pregnant. The silence that followed felt like hours. His face went through a series of emotions. Blank, then pale, then something I'd never seen before. Anger mixed with panic. Are you joking? He finally asked. When I assured him I wasn't, that I'd taken 4 tests, things spiraled fast. I'll never forget his next words. You ruined everything. I didn't want this child. I tried explaining it was an accident, probably from the antibiotics interfering with my birth control. We could figure it out together like we always had, couldn't we? That's when he dropped the bomb. Maybe he never wanted children at all? He'd only gone along with my someday plans to keep me happy, but it was always just hypothetical to him. My heart was pounding. Something in his tone, his avoidance, made me ask the question I was terrified to hear answered. Is there someone else? His reaction told me everything before he even spoke. The guilt flashing across his face. The way he couldn't meet my eyes. When I pressed him, he finally confessed. He'd been seeing Vanessa for a few months. Vanessa, his colleague he'd mentioned, was so brilliant, bringing fresh ideas to the team. The one who was 7 years younger than me. While I was processing this double betrayal, Chad started packing. Not just an overnight bag, but a full suitcase of clothes and essentials. I watched in disbelief as my husband literally walked out on me the same night I told him I was pregnant. Where are you going? I asked, though I already knew. To Vanessa's place. For now. Within 30 minutes of my pregnancy announcement, Chad was standing by our front door with his suitcase. I'll come back for the rest of my stuff later, he said. You're seriously doing this? Walking out on your pregnant wife? I can't be a father. I'm not ready. No one is ever completely ready, I shot back. But that's not how life works. He just mumbled, I'm sorry, and said he'd call in a few days. Then he was gone. I sat in our suddenly tuck-quiet apartment, trying to process what had just happened. 1 minute, I was announcing my pregnancy. The next, my husband was gone, off to his younger girlfriend's place, leaving me and our unborn child behind. I called my best friend Julie, sobbing so hard she could barely understand me. She came over immediately, holding me as I cried. I thought I knew him. I kept saying, how could I have been so wrong? The next morning I woke up on the couch with Julie, sleeping in the armchair nearby. For a split second, I hoped it had all been a nightmare. Then the wave of nausea hit, reminding me that not only was my husband gone, but I was still very much pregnant. Julie made me toast and tea, insisting I eat something for the baby's sake. My hand drifted to my stomach. Whatever Chad had decided, this was still my child. I tried calling Chad throughout the day. Every call went straight to voicemail. My text asking him not to shut me out went unanswered. By afternoon, anger started replacing the shock. I called my OBGYN to schedule my first prenatal appointment. I was going to move forward with or without him. That evening, Chad's mother, Rebecca, called. The conversation was brief but illuminating. She said Chad had explained the situation and suggested I give him time because he was still too young for a family. He's 31, I pointed out. She brushed it off, saying he was focused on his career. Then came the real kicker. She hinted that I should consider my options, clearly suggesting termination without directly saying it. I'm keeping this baby, I said firmly. Your grandchild, regardless of Chad's decision. The call ended with me shaking with anger, finally understanding where some of Chad's attitudes came from. His parents had always coddled him, treated him like he could do no wrong. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work, trying to act normal despite feeling like my world had imploded. I contacted a lawyer to understand my options. I started researching single motherhood and childcare costs. I looked at my finances, calculating how I could make this work alone if I had to. Chad finally texted 3 days after leaving, not to ask how I was doing or to apologize, but to talk about logistics. When could he get his things? Could we keep this civil? Civil? As if there was anything civil about abandoning your pregnant wife for your younger mistress? I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out my next move, because one thing had become crystal clear. I was on my own now, and I needed to be strong, not just for me, but for the tiny life growing inside me. The baby deserved better than a father who'd run at the first sign of responsibility, and I was going to make damn sure they had everything they needed, even if I had to do it alone. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. Years later, when I'd built a beautiful life for myself and my child, when I'd finally moved on and found happiness, Chad would come crawling back. And when he did, he'd discovered just how much I'd changed, and how little I needed him anymore. 3 days after Chad walked out, I finally heard from him. But it wasn't the conversation I'd hoped for. Not an apology, not a let's talk this through. Nothing even close. Just a cold, practical text informing me he was staying at Vanessa's and would send money for bills. That was it. No, how are you feeling? No acknowledgement that I was carrying his child. Just logistics. I replied immediately, fingers shaking as I typed. We need to talk in person. His response came 20 minutes later. I need space. I'm not ready to talk yet. Space. He needed space. As if I wasn't the one dealing with morning sickness, doctor's appointments, and the complete upheaval of my life. A week passed, then 2. The apartment felt emptier each day. Then one afternoon, I came home from work to find things missing. More of his clothes gone from the closet, his favorite books removed from the shelf. The cologne he always wore vanished from the bathroom counter, taking his scent with it. He'd come by while I was at work, like a thief in the night. On the kitchen counter, he'd left his keys next to a handwritten note. Brief, emotionless. He'd paid rent through next month and would contact me about divorce after speaking with a lawyer. Divorce just like that. The word sat there on paper, making everything horribly real. I had my first prenatal appointment alone. I sat in the waiting room surrounded by glowing couples. The fathers to be holding their partners' hands, rubbing their backs, sharing excited whispers. I filled out the forms by myself, checked in by myself, and walked into the exam room by myself. When the technician squirted that cold gel on my stomach and pressed the ultrasound wand against my skin, I held my breath. Then I heard it, my baby's heartbeat for the first time, that fast, rhythmic whooshing sound, like galloping horses. I broke down crying right there on the exam table, tears streaming down my face and into my ears. The technician handed me tissues with a gentle smile, probably thinking these were tears of joy. They weren't. They were tears of grief for the family I thought we'd be, for the moment I'd imagined sharing with Chad, for everything that was supposed to be different, but they were also tears of love. Because that sound, that beautiful, impossible sound, Was my baby real and alive and depending on me? The baby measured right on track. The technician assured me everything looked perfect. They gave me a tiny printout of the ultrasound image, just a little bean-shaped blur, but already my child. When I got home, I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet, a reminder that no matter what happened with Chad, this little person was counting on me. 3 weeks after Chad left, his father Roland called. Unlike Rebecca's cold, judgmental approach, he at least started by asking how I was doing. Honestly, I said, my voice tight. Not great. I was abandoned by my husband for a younger woman, and his mother suggested I get an abortion. So, not my best month. Roland tried to smooth things over, his voice uncomfortably apologetic. He claimed Rebecca didn't mean it like that they were just concerned about Chad's career and promotion prospects. He called my pregnancy unfortunate timing, as if I'd scheduled it poorly, like a badly planned vacation. Chad just isn't in a place where he can be a father right now, Roland explained, his tone almost pleading. I wasn't planning to be a single mother either, I shot back. But adults deal with life's unexpected challenges. That's what being an adult means. Roland offered financial help, which should have felt generous but didn't, because in the next breath, he made it clear that Chad needed to focus on his career, that he and Vanessa had a real connection, and that I should understand this was all very difficult for Chad too. Difficult for Chad right after hanging up. I sat there staring at my phone and realized something important. Something that hurt but also clarified everything. I was utterly alone in this. Chad had chosen Vanessa. His parents had chosen to protect him, to enable him, to treat his abandonment of his pregnant wife as some kind of unfortunate circumstance rather than the cruel betrayal it was. It was just me and my baby now. But somehow, that realization wasn't crushing. It was clarifying. I didn't have to wonder anymore. Didn't have to hope Chad would come around or wait for his parents to suddenly develop a conscience. I could start planning my life, our life, without the weight of uncertainty dragging me down. I called Julie that night. I need to move. I told her, there are too many memories here. I can't heal in this apartment. Move in with me, she said immediately, without hesitation. Stay as long as you need while you find a new place. As I looked around the apartment Chad and I had shared, I felt something unexpected, a tiny flicker of hope. Not for reconciliation. That bridge was thoroughly burned. But for the future, my baby's future, whatever came next would be hard. I had no illusions about that. Single motherhood, divorce, rebuilding my life from scratch. None of it would be easy. But one thing I knew for certain, my child would never feel unwanted. Not by me. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Tomorrow, I was meeting with the lawyer again to start divorce proceedings. Chad thought he could just walk away, start fresh with his young girlfriend, leave the mess of his marriage and impending fatherhood behind. We'd see about that. I might be down right now, but I was not out. Not even close. I can't believe it's been a year since I last wrote. First, thank you to everyone who commented with advice and support. I read every single message, even when I couldn't respond. Your words meant more than you know during those dark, impossible days. Dad, so much has happened. Saying that feels like the understatement of the century. I have a son now, an actual tiny human who depends on me for everything. His name is T. He's 8 months old, and despite everything, despite all the pain and betrayal that led to his existence, he's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Yesterday, while I was folding his impossibly small socks, something hit me that stopped me cold. Chad has never met him. Not once. Not when he was born, not for his first smile, not for his first Christmas. Not ever. My son's father lives less than 30 minutes away, and he's a complete stranger to his own child. Let me catch you up on everything. The divorce was finalized when I was 7 months pregnant. Chad didn't contest anything, which my lawyer said was unusual but made everything move faster. Part of me thinks he was just eager to close this chapter and pretend it never happened. The judge ordered reasonable child support based on Chad's income, which is something at least, though that's been its own nightmare, which I'll get to. I moved out of our apartment and found a smaller 2-bedroom, place closer to Julie. The rent is higher than I'd like, but it's in a decent school district. I've learned that you start thinking about things like school districts way earlier than you'd expect when you're a parent. My dining room is now half nursery overflow with a pack-and-play bouncer, and what feels like a small toy store exploding across my living space. Tiago was born on a Tuesday night after 19 hours of labor. Julie was my birthing partner, holding my hand and feeding me ice chips while I swore I couldn't do it, that it was too much, that I wasn't strong enough. The nurses kept asking about the father, and I got tired of explaining, so I just started saying, he's not in the picture. It felt both true and like a massive understatement. Those first weeks were a blur of sleeplessness and wondering if I was doing anything right. The night we came home from the hospital, Tiago wouldn't stop crying. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 in the morning, also crying, Googling, why won't baby sleep on my phone while he wailed in my arms? I'd never felt so alone or so overwhelmed. But we survived. Day by day, we figured it out together. I learned his cries. Hungry sounds different from tired, which sounds different from I just want to be held. I discovered he loves being sung to, even though I can't carry a tune. I watched his personality emerge bit by bit. He's observant, stubborn, wonder where he gets that, and has a laugh that can light up an entire room. Work has been complicated. I went back when Tiago was 10 weeks old because I needed the money. My boss Anastasia has been surprisingly understanding, letting me work from home 2 days a week. Finding childcare nearly broke me, financially and emotionally. Daycare costs more than my rent, which seems absolutely insane. But it's the reality. The financial stuff has been one of the hardest parts. Child support from Chad comes sometimes, but there's always an excuse when it's late. His car needed repairs. He had unexpected expenses. He's switching jobs. Last month it was 2 weeks late because he and Vanessa were in Spain. I saw the pictures on Instagram before he bothered to respond to my texts about the missing payment. There they were. Chad and Vanessa, looking sun-kissed and carefree at some rooftop bar. No signs of sleepless nights or spit-up-stained clothes in their world. Just cocktails and sunsets and the freedom to pretend responsibility doesn't exist. Meanwhile, I'm here, surviving, raising our son, alone. But here's the thing. I'm not broken, tired, yes, stretched thin, absolutely. But I'm also stronger than I ever thought possible. And he's thriving, happy, healthy, loved beyond measure. Chad has no idea what he's missing. And honestly, that's his loss, not ours. After seeing those photos of Chad and Vanessa living their best life while I struggled alone with our son, I did something I should have done months ago. I blocked them both. Julie said it was better for my mental health, and she was right. But let me tell you what led to that moment and everything that's happened since. Julie has been my absolute lifeline through all of this. I don't know what I would have done without her. She comes over with takeout when I'm too exhausted to even think about cooking, holds Tiago so I can take an actual shower that lasts longer than 3 minutes, and never once complains when all I can talk about is baby poop consistency or sleep regressions. Those are the things that consume your life as a new parent. The things no one tells you about. She even organized a small baby shower for me when I was 8 months pregnant, after all of Chad's friends ghosted me. Funny how quickly people pick sides, isn't it? The moment Chad left, they all vanished like smoke. No texts asking how I was doing, no offers to help, nothing. It was like our years of friendship meant nothing the second things got messy. Now, Chad's parents have been an interesting situation. Remember how they initially supported their son abandoning his pregnant wife? How Rebecca suggested I should consider my options regarding the pregnancy. Well, they had a sudden change of heart once Tiago was actually born. I got a text from Rebecca about a month after he arrived, asking to see their grandson, just like that. No apology, no acknowledgement of how they'd treated me. Just a casual, we'd love to meet the baby as if nothing had happened. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to figure out how I felt about it, to process whether I even wanted these people in my son's life after everything they'd said and done. Then came the flood. Flowers delivered to my door, baby clothes in expensive brands I'd never buy for myself. Even a handwritten letter about how they'd love to be part of their grandson's life and wanted to make things right. The guilt must have finally kicked in, I suppose. I finally agreed to a short visit when Tiago was 4 months old. It was awkward, to say the least. The kind of awkward that makes your shoulders tense and your smile feel fake. Rebecca kept commenting on how much he looked like Chad as a baby, her voice getting emotional, while Roland took about 50 photos on his phone. Cooing at Tiago with grandparent enthusiasm, they brought expensive baby gifts, top-of-the-line stuff, and talked about starting a college fund for him. Nice gestures, sure. But not once did they mention their son's absence. Not once did they apologize for their previous behavior, for suggesting I terminate my pregnancy, for supporting Chad when he walked out. Then they asked to take him for an overnight stay, and I had to draw a hard line. No, I said firmly. That's not happening. No way was I letting my infant go anywhere without me, especially with people who had basically suggested I get rid of him less than a year earlier. I'm his mother, and my job is to protect him. That conversation didn't go well. Rebecca's face went tight, her voice sharp. She accused me of using Tiago to punish Chad. which was rich considering Chad had shown zero interest in meeting his own son. Zero. The irony was almost laughable. That's the part I still can't wrap my head around. How do you know you have a child out there in the world and just not care? Not wonder what they look like, how they're growing, if they're happy or healthy. Chad has sent money sometimes, when he remembers or when I remind him. But he's never once asked for a photo, a video, or a visit. It's like Tiago is just an abstract concept to him, not a real person with his eyes and dimpled chin. I've tried to be the bigger person. I really have. When Tiago was born, I sent Chad a simple text with his birth stats and a photo. Born at 8:47 p.m., 7 pounds 3 ounces. Healthy. No response. Not even a congratulations or glad he's okay. Nothing. I set up a shared photo album online where I occasionally upload pictures, just in case Chad ever wants to see what he's missing. As far as I can tell, he's never opened it. Not once. For Tiago's first Christmas, I sent a holiday card with his photo to Chad's address. The envelope came back 2 weeks later, marked return to sender. That one hurt. I won't lie. Meanwhile, life goes on whether you're ready for it or not. Tiago started daycare and caught every possible virus in his first month there. Another fun surprise of parenthood nobody warns you about. Pink eye, hand-foot-mouth disease, endless colds. But he's developed an immune system of steel since then. He's crawling now, pulling himself up on furniture with this determined look on his face, and putting absolutely everything in his mouth. My apartment is baby-proofed to the extreme. I haven't seen my coffee table without corner protectors in so long. I've forgotten what it actually looks like. My daily routine has become this carefully choreographed dance of efficiency. Wake up at 5:30 in the morning, before Tiago, to shower and get dressed in peace. Get him up, fed, and dressed by 7:15. Daycare drop-off by 8. Work until 5, rushing through emails and meetings. Pick him up by 5:30, paying the late fee on days when meetings run over. Home by 6 for dinner, bath time, stories, and the bedtime routine. Then a few precious hours to clean, do laundry, pay bills. And maybe watch half an episode of something on Netflix before falling asleep on the couch. Rinse and repeat. The hardest moments are the ones no one talks about. Like when Tiago had his first fever at 3 in the morning, burning hot against my chest, and I had to decide alone whether to take him to the emergency room or wait it out. Or when he says mama, but there's no dada in his vocabulary because that person doesn't exist in his world. Or filling out daycare forms that ask for father's information and having to write NA while surrounded by other parents. Casually filling out both sections. But there are beautiful moments too. So many beautiful moments. Morning cuddles when he wakes up, happy and babbling, his face breaking into the biggest smile when he sees me. The way he reaches for me when I pick him up from daycare, like I'm his whole world. His fascination with the ceiling fan, staring up at it like it's the most magical thing he's ever seen. His absolute joy when splashing in the bath, giggling so hard he gets hiccups. The weight of him falling asleep on my chest, his breath warm against my neck, his tiny fingers curled around mine. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. Being a single parent is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. There are days when I'm so tired I put the milk in the cabinet and the cereal in the fridge. Days when I snap at customer service people over nothing because I'm running on empty. Days when I cry in the shower because it's the only place Tiago can't hear me. But I'm doing it. We're doing it, and strangely enough, I'm proud of that. Proud of us. Thiago single quotes S first birthday is coming up next month. Julie is helping me plan a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just a few close friends, some cake, and probably more decorations than necessary because Julie gets carried away with Pinterest ideas. I debated inviting Chad's parents but decided against it after our last tense interaction. They still occasionally text asking to see him, but it's always on their terms, with no acknowledgement of how their son has completely abandoned his child. As for Chad himself, I'm not holding my breath for a birthday card, let alone an appearance. Last I heard through mutual friends, he and Vanessa moved in together and got a dog. I guess that's the level of responsibility he's comfortable with. A pet, not a person. The kicker came just last week. I finally got approved for a modest apartment in a slightly better area. It's nothing fancy, nothing like the places I used to dream about. But it has a small yard where Tiago can play and the schools are good. As I was sitting in the leasing office signing the paperwork, feeling hopeful about this fresh start, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Rebecca. They were having a family reunion next month and wanted to include their grandson. The text included a photo attachment, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped. There was Chad, arms wrapped around Vanessa, both of them smiling at the camera looking perfectly happy. Tanned and carefree, like they didn't have a worry in the world. Like his son didn't exist somewhere, taking his first steps, saying his first words. Growing up without him, I stared at that photo for a long time. My hands were shaking. There was Chad living his best life. As if his son was nothing more than a distant inconvenience he'd successfully escaped. Something shifted in me in that moment. Not anger exactly, though there's still plenty of that simmering under the surface. More like clarity. Pure, sharp clarity. I've spent an entire year waiting for Chad to step up, to show even the slightest interest in his child. A year sending updates into the void, hoping he'd suddenly care. A year trying to be fair and reasonable despite everything he'd done. Everything he'd walked away from. I was done. I texted Rebecca back with steady hands. Tiago won't be attending. If Chad wants to meet his son, he knows how to reach me. But I'm done making excuses for him or pretending he's anything but absent by choice. Then I blocked her number 2. Maybe that sounds harsh. Maybe some people would say I'm being vindictive or petty, but I'm done protecting Chad's image or his feelings. I'm done carrying the entire emotional load while he gets to live consequence-free, posting happy photos with his girlfriend while his son grows up fatherless. I'm done pretending, for Tiago's sake, that his father might suddenly become interested in his existence. The truth is simple and clear. We're better off without someone who could so easily walk away. Tiago deserves people in his life who choose him, who show up for him, who love him unconditionally. And if that means it's just me and him against the world, then so be it. We'll be just fine. I can't force Chad to be the father Tiago deserves. I learned that the hard way. So here we are, 1 year after I last updated you all. A single mom and her son against the world. It's not the life I planned, not even close. But looking at Tiago's sleeping face tonight, his little chest rising and falling peacefully, I realized something important. Sometimes the family you end up with isn't the one you expected, but it's still perfect in its own way. I don't know what the future holds. The divorce settlement included a clause about revisiting custody if Chad ever decides he wants to be involved. That honestly seemed like a joke at the time, but my lawyer insisted it was standard procedure. Part of me hopes Chad stays away forever. Another tiny part, buried deep. Still can't believe he doesn't want to know his amazing son. The son who laughs at silly jokes and gives the best hugs and looks at the world with such wonder. For now, I'm focusing on what I can control. Building a stable home. Creating happy memories. Being both mom and dad as best I can. And maybe, just maybe, finding a way to trust again someday. But that's a problem for future me. Present me needs to finish the laundry and get to bed. Tiago will be up at 6 in the morning whether I'm ready or not. So that's my update. 1 year down, one perfect baby boy, and taking it one day at a time. It's been 4 years since my last update. 4 whole years. I honestly didn't think I'd be posting here again, but something happened yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. I needed to put it somewhere, to process it. And this felt like the right place. Tiago just turned 5 last month. 5 years old. I still can't wrap my head around it. My little baby is now this chatty kindergartner who knows all the planets in order and corrects my pronunciation of dinosaur names. Time is absolutely wild. Yesterday was his first day of kindergarten. I took the morning off work specifically to walk him in, expecting the usual chaos of drop-off. Excited kids, nervous parents, the whole scene. What I wasn't expecting was to see Leroy, one of Chad's old friends, in the school parking lot dropping off his daughter. I froze for a second, my hand tightening around Tiago's, but he was tugging at me. Excited to see his new classroom, so I pushed through the awkwardness and kept walking. After getting Tiago settled in his classroom, complete with only minor tears from me and none from him, I was heading back to my car when Leroy approached. I braced myself for awkwardness, maybe some judgment or uncomfortable questions. Instead, he just asked how I was doing. Simple, genuine, kind. We ended up getting coffee at the shop across from the school. And that's when he dropped the bomb that changed everything. Chad and Vanessa broke up 6 months ago. Apparently, Vanessa wanted kids. After everything, after he abandoned his own child to be with her, she wanted kids. And Chad kept saying he wasn't ready. At 35 years old, after stringing her along for years, she finally gave him an ultimatum. And he chose, well, not her, but it gets worse. Chad's company downsized last year, and he's been struggling to find stable work ever since. According to Leroy, he's been crashing on friends' couches while Vanessa kept the apartment they shared. The perfect life he abandoned us for, the life he chose over his own son, has completely fallen apart. I sat there stirring my coffee, watching the foam swirl, not sure how to feel. There was no satisfaction. No serves him right moment like I might have imagined years ago when the hurt was still fresh and raw. Just this strange emptiness, like hearing about a character from a TV show I stopped watching seasons ago. Someone who used to matter but doesn't anymore. What struck me most was realizing how completely different my life is now compared to when Chad left. After years of juggling single motherhood and work, barely keeping my head above water, things have finally stabilized. I've been at the same company for 6 years now, and last year my boss Anastasia promoted me to senior project manager. The raise was substantial, enough that I could finally afford to buy a small townhouse in a good school district. It's nothing fancy. Nothing like the homes I used to dream about when Chad and I were together, but it's ours. There's Tiago's handprints painted in bright blue on his bedroom wall. A little garden in the back where we grow tomatoes that never quite turn out right, but we try every summer anyway. It's home. Financial stability was hard. There were so many nights of spreadsheets and budget calculations, weighing every single expense, choosing between things I wanted and things we needed. Child support from Chad eventually stopped completely around Tiago's 3rd birthday. After multiple missed payments, empty promises, and excuse after excuse, I filed with the enforcement agency. But Chad had changed jobs so many times by then it was like chasing a ghost. Eventually, I made a decision. The stress of fighting for that money, the constant disappointment and anxiety, wasn't worth it. I'd rather Tiago see me calm and present than angry and stressed over money we could manage without. The hardest questions started coming about a year ago. Why don't I have a daddy? Tiago asked one afternoon while we were grocery shopping, completely out of nowhere. Just standing there in the cereal aisle, holding a box of his favorite kind. I'd prepared for this moment. Read articles about age-appropriate explanations, talk to my therapist about the best approach, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for looking into those innocent eyes and trying to explain why his father chose not to be part of his life. I told him a simplified version of the truth, that his daddy wasn't ready to be a parent. But that didn't mean anything was wrong with Tiago, that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people, but that I wanted him and loved him enough for 2 parents. Those conversations never get easier. Each time Tiago notices another kid with their dad at the park, or sees father-son activities advertised at school, my heart breaks a little. But we've built our own traditions, our own support system. Julie is still his favorite aunt, coming over for movie nights and teaching him card tricks. My parents drive up from 2 hours away every month to spend weekends with their grandson. We have our village. Even without Chad. Then, about 10 months ago, something unexpected happened. I was at a parent-teacher night at Tiago's preschool, standing awkwardly by the snack table like I always did. That's when I kept noticing this dad with kind eyes and a terrible dad joke t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right." His daughter Emma was in Tiago's class, and they'd become friends. I overheard him gently but firmly handling Emma's meltdown over having to leave the classroom toys behind. Something about his patience, the calm way he spoke to her, caught my attention. His name was Douglas, widowed father of Emma, makes homemade pizza on Fridays with dinosaur-shaped pepperoni for the kids, never forgets Teacher Appreciation Week, doesn't mind when my son talks endlessly about space and planets and black holes. It started innocently. Playdates because the kids were already friends. Then coffee while they played at the park. Then texting about school announcements we'd both missed. Then dinner one night after Emma and Tiago's soccer practice ran late. Then more dinners, more texts, more conversations that stretched late into the evening after the kids were asleep. Douglas never rushed anything. He understood completely that I was a package deal. Me and Tiago he asked thoughtful questions about Tiago's interests. Brought him books about stars after hearing about his space phase. The first time he fixed Tiago's wobbly bicycle seat without being asked. Without making a big deal about it, I nearly cried at the simple kindness of it. 6 months into our friendship, Douglas told me about losing Emma's mom to cancer when Emma was just a year old. How he'd been terrified of raising a daughter alone. Hallie kept her mom's photos everywhere in their house, so Emma would always know her, always feel connected to her. The raw honesty of his grief and his love made me trust him in a way I hadn't trusted anyone in years. Maybe ever. We've been officially dating for 7 months now. The kids know we're special friends and seem genuinely happy about our blended playdates and movie nights. Last month, Douglas and I had the talk about where this is going. Nothing dramatic, just sitting on my back porch after the kids were asleep, talking honestly about our hopes and fears and what we both wanted. He wants to move forward together, build something real. So do I. We're taking it slow, being careful for the kids' sake and our own. But for the first time in 5 years, I can actually imagine a future that includes partnership, love, and maybe even happiness. And Chad, learning about his failed relationship, his career struggles, his life falling apart, it doesn't give me the satisfaction I once thought it would. I've moved so far past that chapter of my life that he's barely a footnote now. The only thing that still bothers me is knowing Tiago has a father out there who chose not to know him, who missed his first steps, his first words, his first day of school, who will never know what an incredible kid he is. But that's Chad's loss, not ours. We're doing just fine without him. Better than fine, actually. We're thriving. And maybe, just maybe, we're building something even better than I originally planned. For the first time in 5 years, I'm allowing myself to picture a future with someone again. A real future, not just surviving day to day. And it feels both terrifying and wonderful. But just as things are finally falling into place, the past decided to make an unwelcome appearance. Chad's parents have suddenly renewed their interest in Tiago after years of sporadic texts and occasional $20 gift cards on birthdays. Rebecca called last month, her voice overly cheerful, asking if they could take him for a weekend. Just like that. As if the last 5 years of minimal contact meant nothing. When I explained that wasn't going to happen, not after years of barely being present in his life, she got defensive immediately. Her tone turned sharp. She claimed they'd always wanted a relationship with their grandson, but thought I was keeping them away. Keeping them away? As if I'd been the barrier. The truth is, they made barely any effort until recently. A few texts here and there, birthday cards with money, but no personal message. No real attempt to build a relationship with Tiago, and now suddenly they want weekend visits. I wonder if Chad moving back in with them has anything to do with this sudden surge of grandparent interest. Meanwhile, Douglas asked me last week if he could take Tiago fishing along with Emma next weekend. Something so simple, so normal, yet it made my throat tight with emotion. Watching Tiago's face light up with excitement about learning to fish like real boys do, as he put it, reminded me how much this man has become part of our lives without any obligation to do so. After Leroy's revelation yesterday about Chad's breakup and struggles, I did something I hadn't done in years. I checked Chad's Instagram. I know, nothing good ever comes from checking your ex's social media. But curiosity got the better of me. His carefully curated feed of exotic vacations and rooftop parties with Vanessa has been completely replaced. Now it's all vague, inspirational quotes about new beginnings and finding yourself. The kind of posts people make when they're trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else. There was no mention anywhere of his son turning 5. His son who lives just miles away. I closed the app feeling oddly at peace. That chapter of my life felt so distant, like watching a movie about someone else. 5 years ago, I was broken, terrified, and completely alone. Today, I have a career I'm proud of, a home I actually own, an amazing kid who astonishes me every single day, and a partner who chooses us daily. Not because he has to, but because he genuinely wants to. So that's where I am 5 years later. Not where I expected to be, but exactly where I'm meant to be, and Chad. His choices led him exactly where his choices would naturally lead. I can't even find it in me to be bitter anymore. That part of my life feels like a different timeline. One I stepped out of a long time ago, or at least that's what I thought before last Saturday. Last Saturday started like any other weekend, pancake breakfast with chocolate chips because Tiago insisted, then rushing to get him ready for his soccer game, grabbing water bottles and snacks, making sure his cleats were tied properly. Douglas and I were huddled together under an umbrella on the sidelines, watching Tiago's team, the Blue Lightning, chase the ball across the muddy field. The kids were slipping and sliding, laughing even when they fell. It was one of those perfect, ordinary moments. That's when Douglas nudged me, his voice tight. "Is that someone you know?" I looked up. Across the field, partially hidden behind other parents, stood Chad. My heart stopped. After 5 years of complete absence, zero contact, nothing. My ex-husband was just standing there watching our son play soccer. No warning, no heads-up text, nothing. When halftime came, Tiago ran over to us for water, his face flushed and excited. "Did you see my defense, Mom? I totally blocked that kid from scoring." That's when I noticed Chad approaching us, walking slowly, hesitantly, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. Tiago spotted him too, his enthusiasm fading into confusion. "Who's that?" he asked, looking up at me. Before I could answer, before I could even process what was happening, Chad was standing right there, awkwardly, uncomfortably, like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong family gathering. "Wow," Chad said, his voice shaky. He's gotten so big. I felt Douglas tense beside me, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. Protective, supportive. I sent Tiago back to his team with a forced smile, telling him we'd talk about his great playing after the game. Then I turned to Chad, my voice low and controlled despite the anger bubbling inside me. "What are you doing here?" he admitted, looking at the ground that his mother had mentioned Tiago's soccer schedule. Of course, Rebecca. The sudden increase in contact from his parents over the past month suddenly made perfect sense. Douglas stepped forward and introduced himself calmly. "I'm Douglas, Tiago's stepdad." I noticed Chad flinch slightly at that word, stepdad. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. "Actually," I corrected, my voice steel. "Douglas has been more of a father to Tiago than you've ever been. You're biologically his father. That's all." The words hung in the air between us. Chad looked like he'd been slapped, but I didn't care. It was the truth. After some tense back and forth, Chad asked if we could talk after the game. "Just 20 minutes, please." I reluctantly agreed, my stomach churning. Douglas took Tiago and Emma for victory ice cream, distracting them with promises of extra sprinkles. While I headed to the nearby coffee shop to meet the man who'd destroyed my life 5 years ago, Chad was already there when I arrived. He'd ordered me a cappuccino, sliding it across the table with an uncertain smile. I stared at it. I'd switched to lattes years ago. He didn't know that. Such a small detail, but somehow it highlighted just how much had changed, how little he knew about the person I'd become. His story came out in pieces, halting and uncomfortable. Therapy for over a year now. 8 months sober. He said that part like he wanted praise. Moving back in with his parents after things ended with Vanessa. Living in his childhood bedroom Then came the most stunning admission. He'd actually asked his parents to limit their contact with Tiago over the years because he couldn't handle the reminder of what he'd abandoned. Hearing about his son's milestones, seeing photos, it was all too painful for him. The selfishness of it took my breath away. Now, he said, he wanted to make things right. He wanted to know his son, to be a father. I told him plainly, my voice shaking slightly, that Tiago wasn't the helpless baby he'd walked out on. He was a person now. A person with feelings, opinions, a whole life that Chad knew absolutely nothing about. "You can't just walk in and decide to be dad when it's convenient for you," Chad acknowledged. He couldn't just walk in and immediately fill that role. Then, almost as an afterthought, he asked about my relationship with Douglas. Something like pain crossed his face when I told him the truth. That Douglas had been more of a father to Tiago in 10 months than Chad had been in 5 years. Despite my anger, despite everything, I told him I would consider allowing a supervised meeting, but there would be strict conditions. I would be present the entire time. It would be brief, and if he disappeared again after this, that was it. Forever. No more chances. 3 days later, after long conversations with Douglas and our family therapist, I arranged a meeting at a local park. Telling Tiago was harder than I'd expected. His questions absolutely broke my heart. Why does he want to see me now? Can Douglas come too? Will he like me? And the one that nearly destroyed me, should I wear my soccer jersey so he knows I'm good at soccer? The meeting itself wasn't terrible, which somehow felt worse. Chad brought a Lego soccer field set, clearly expensive, clearly a guilt purchase. They built it together on a park bench while I watched from a few feet away, my stomach in knots. I noticed genetic similarities I'd forgotten over the years. The same concentration face when focusing on something difficult, the same eye crinkle when they smiled. It was unsettling. Seeing pieces of Chad and my son. Over the next 2 weeks, we had several similar supervised meetings. Short, controlled, always with me present. Then Chad called with a new request. He wanted to take Tiago to a movie alone, just the two of them. Absolutely not, I said immediately. You've had 3 weeks versus 5 years. That's not happening. To his credit, he seemed to accept this. He suggested we all 3 go instead. Him, me, and Tiago. I was considering it when everything changed. The next afternoon, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, there stood Chad with his parents flanking him like bodyguards. Roland and Rebecca pushed forward immediately, talking over each other about moving forward as a family and what's best for Tiago and giving Chad a real chance. Chad stood behind them, mumbling weakly that he'd told them this wasn't the right way to do this. I sent them home, my voice firm and final. But Chad lingered, asking to speak with me alone for just a moment. That's when he dropped the bomb I never saw coming. "I still love you, Melissa." I never stopped. The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. I stood there, speechless, as he continued, He suggested that despite my relationship with Douglas, despite everything that had happened, we should consider reuniting as Tiago's real parents. Because our son deserved that chance. A real family. I asked him to leave, my voice hollow. I told him I needed to think, though I already knew my answer. When Douglas came downstairs a few minutes later, having heard raised voices, I told him about Chad's declaration. Everything I watched concern flash across his face. Saw him trying to hide his worry about being compared to Tiago's biological father. I took his hand and looked him straight in the eye. I am exactly where I want to be. With you. This is my choice. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A text from Chad. I meant what I said about wanting another chance. With our family. Think about it, please. I stared at those words, feeling an odd mix of anger and pity. The man who walked out when I needed him most, who abandoned his pregnant wife for a younger woman, who missed 5 years of his son's life by choice, wasn't someone I could ever trust again. Some bridges, once burned, stay ashes. Tomorrow, I'll call Chad to set clear boundaries about his role in Tiago's life, as a biological father only, not as my partner, not as part of our family, because my family is already complete. And Chad lost his place in it the night he packed his bags and walked out that door.